5 Melbourne suburbs I would buy right now with a 750k budget. Every one of them is undervalued. Every one of them with a structural reason it shouldn't be priced where it is. And one of them is sitting on the kind of a value add opportunity I haven't seen in the central point over the last couple of years. I'm Oliver Chung, founder of Insighto, and what we do, we help investors acquire and manufacture equity in residential property right across Australia, and Melbourne in 2026 is the most undervalued capital city market I've seen in this cycle. ANZ has it 13% undervalued versus Sydney. The median house price gap is over 600k, the widest in 2 decades. KPMG is forecasting a 6.6% house price growth this year. That's the strongest projection nationally. If you've been waiting for the entry point, this is it. Here's what I'm going to walk you through in the next 14 minutes. First, the framework. What separates undervalued from just cheap? Most people get this wrong. Once you have a framework, the rest of the video will ultimately make sense. Then we'll unpack the 5 suburbs I'm counting down from number 5 to number 1. By the time we get to number 1 and the real deal I target there, you'll know exactly why it's at the top of my list. After that, the 2 suburbs are cut from the list because the cut tells you as much as the keep. And finally, the biggest mistake people make when they try to do this themselves. If you do nothing else after this video, get this part. By the end, you'll have a 750k shortlist you can act on this week. Before I name a single suburb, let's unpack the Insighto framework, because most people watching this kind of video are going to make the same mistake what I see day in, day out. We're going to confuse cheapest with most undervalued. These are not the same thing. Cheapest means the lowest number on the screen. It usually takes you to the furthest fringe, the newest estate, the most commoditized product. No infrastructure, no train, no employment base, and no renovation potential. It potentially yields a high yield on paper because nobody else with choices wants to live there. And now the flashy negative gearing that comes into it. The property is new, so there's nothing to improve. Your entire return depends on the market moving, which is where the exact dependency the budget reforms have just structurally punished. Most undervalued means a suburb where the current price doesn't reflect the structural drivers that are already in motion, where there's a measurable discount to comparable neighbouring suburb that doesn't reflect a real lifestyle or amenity disadvantage. When the housing stock is all enough to have that renovation potential and located well enough to have genuine owner-occupier appeal and demand, where the yield supports a hold, the infrastructure supports the growth thesis, and at the asset level, it can be improved to manufacture equity. With 5 criteria, here's a filter I would apply. Every suburb on my list has to pass all 5. Number 1, a measurable price gap to a comparable neighbouring suburb. This doesn't reflect a real disadvantage. Number 2, sub 1.5% vacancy rate and healthy yields in the current Melbourne market. The holding costs test must pass before the growth thesis matters. Number 3, an identifiable structural driver in the next 5 years. Transport, employment, gentrification, supply shock. Number 4, median price still below that 2022 peak, meaning the suburb hasn't already participated in the post-COVID re-rating. Number 5, and most important, genuine owner-occupier investment grade appeal. Avoid suburbs that move only where the investor flocks, especially right now. 5 filters, every one of them has to be in yes, and here are the 5 filters that has passed that. Starting with number 5, Broadmeadows, postcode 3047, 610 to about 635, 4.07 gross yield, 16 kilometers from CBD on that Craigieburn line up north. Here's why this suburb is on my list and the critical due diligence warning that comes with it. Auction clearance running at, surprisingly, 92%. Days on market down to 26. a 49% reduction year on year out. Stock and market are down 30%. Demand is accelerating while supply is contracting at the same time. The Broadmeadows revitalisation project is a multi-billion-dollar urban renewal play. The suburb has been identified as a key node on that suburban rail loop. Now, the housing stock is predominantly 1980s and 70 homes on generous allotments, exactly the value add profile I target. Tight presentation, good bones, large land, renovation upside. Now, here's a due diligence point that most buyers will miss in Broadmeadows, and it's a massive deal breaker. Parts of the suburb fall under the Melbourne Airport Environment Overlay. If your property sits inside that overlay, you face restrictions on future development, potential noise impact, and a structurally limited buyer pool at exit. Every acquisition in Broadmeadows must be verified as sitting outside this airport overlay before you commit. This is a non-negotiable. Get the planning certificate, check the overlay mapping. If it's inside the overlay, walk away, regardless of how good the price looks. The discount there will simply exist for a reason. Outside the overlay, Broadmeadows is one of the most compelling value add plays in Melbourne. Yes, it's got a low ERSAD, which creates a price discount. That's why you're buying in at the lower 600 instead of 850 in a suburb, same distance, outside CBD with the same train access. The discount is the opportunity. Craigieburn, postcode 3064, 680k median, 4% yield, 26k north of the CBD. This is a northern growth corridor play. Train, schools, shopping. Stock is tight. Vendor expectations are rising. The median moved from sub 650 to 680 in just 12 months. That tells you the market is already re-rating. The demographic is young families, predominantly owner-occupiers, which matters significantly more than it did a year ago because your future buyer pool is completely unaffected by the budget reforms. At 680k, you're near the top of the budget, with the growth trajectory and the owner-occupier dominance justify the entry. Get in before the next leg up, not during it. Number 3, Cranbourne, postcode 3977. Looking at about a 652 million price, 3.9% yield, Southeast Corridor. This is a Metro Tunnel story. The Metro Tunnel opened in Feb 2026. Cranbourne now has single seat travel through the CBD via the new tunnel. That is a genuine steep change in connectivity that did not exist 12 months ago. Large block, strong family demand, full retail catchment among Melbourne's most active sub 700k suburbs. The Southeast Corridor in Melbourne's population growth engine. And Cranbourne sits at the epicenter of that growth, with established infrastructure that newer suburbs further out simply do not have. When a train line materially improves, the suburb it serves can and will reprice. The re-rating is happening in Cranbourne right now. Number 2, St Albans. Postcode 3021. We're looking at a 705k medium, 4 houses, 524 units at around a 4.5% yield, 16 kilometres west of the CBD. This is a classic next suburb outplay. Sunshine is that designated metropolitan activity centre for Melbourne's West. It's a future suburban rail loop station. It already has re-rated St Albans significantly. It sits adjacent to Sunshine and has not caught up just yet. The Sunbury line gives direct access to the CBD. The Metro Tunnel has materially improved the connectivity of the entire Western Rail corridor. The price gap between Sunshine and St Albans in the structural mispricing that corrects over the next 5 to 10 years on a long-term hold. Now, here's a pattern. You can map it through every metro market in this country. Every time a train line improves, the suburbs that are one station further out will reprice to close the gap. And Ringwood is a classic example of that. That's a history. That's a pattern. St Albans is now sitting in that window right now. Pick number 1. And my number 1 pick, Melton West. 550k to 600k median, Yields alone at 4.5%, 39Ks west of Melbourne CBD. This is my top pick, and let me be specific about why. Because the framework matters as much as the suburb. Melton West outperforms the broader Melton LGA in line with Cranbourne because you're accessing established stock on larger lots in more mature streetscape with genuine renovation potential. The housing stock is older, which means it presents with the cosmetic inefficiency that creates manufactured equity opportunities. Tired kitchen, original bathrooms, dated presentation on good sized land. And at that 550 to 620K mark, the hoarding costs in the quarantine loss environment is the most survivable entry point in this entire list, and the renovation upside is real. Let me show you exactly how the deal works on a property like this. Numbers are based on current comparable sales. Melton Corridor, May 2026. The property type, we're looking at a 3 to 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 500 to 800 square meter lot, built in the 1990s or early 2000s. The original or near condition, the kitchen hasn't been touched in the past 15 years. It's a builder grade bathroom, worn carpet, tired paint, either overgrown or non-existent landscape, structurally sound, good sized land, mature streetscapes, established trees, wider roads, not project home estates. A generation of Melton housing that has character and space. These properties transact between 550 to 630K, depending on condition and exact street. A well-negotiated buy on a cosmetically tied property sits in that 560 to 580 range. Let's use 575 as the acquisition price. The rent in current condition would approximately be in your low 400s, 430 on average. Your gross yield at 575 purchase on a 440 per week is 3.98%. That's manageable in the quarantine loss environment. The hoarding cost gap between rent and mortgage is tight enough to survive without relying on a tax offset. Now, come in, interject a private insight to fast equity renovation play. About 50K spend, new kitchen, new cabinets, new engineered stone benchtop, quality appliances for that demographic. Bathroom modernization, new flooring throughout, hybrid timber replacing carpet, full interior and exterior repaint potentially. Front landscape for street appeal, rear yard cleanup for basic outdoor entertaining. Your total cost base, 575 plus 55K renovation upfront. That's 28 stamp duty and legals equals about that 658K. Post renovation value we're typically seeing in your 700s. The comparable evidence in Melton West shows a well-presented renovated 4-bedroom house on 600 square meters lots transacting in that high 6s to early 7s when we present at owner-occupier standard. Manufactured equity, 42,000 to about 72 above your total cost base created through renovation, not through market movement. That equity would exist on day one. Your post-renovation rent moves you into your low 500 mark. The rental uplift from repositioning a tied house to a modern move-in ready family home is consistently $50 on average a week in this market. Your yield moves to above 4%. Your cash flow gap narrows further. Now compare that to the investor who takes the same 700K and buys a safe property in the middle ring suburb. Larger mortgage, weaker yield, deeper negative cash flow, and in the post-budget reform environment, you simply can't offset that loss against wages. Your holding cost of $200 to $300 more a week than that Melton West landlord. No manufactured equity because you bought at full retail price with no renovation opportunity. And your exit buyer is competing in a price bracket where borrowing capacity constraints are biting a lot harder now. The Melton West buyer is by default about 72K ahead on equity. $50 a week better on rent, on cash flow, holding an asset in a corridor with a major infrastructure pipeline, strong first-led home buyer demand, entry price with a borrowing capacity of the largest buying cohort in the country. and the infrastructure pipeline matters. The Melton Hospital is coming, the train station upgrades are funded, commercial development is accelerating. These aren't aspirational promises. These are funded, committed projects with timelines. That is a structural demand catalyst that converts a discount suburb into a re-rated suburb over the next 5 to 10 years. Now, before we get to the big mistake, let me tell you the 2 suburbs are considered and cut out, because a cut tells you as much as a keep, and if you understand the cut, you then simply understand how this framework works. Cut number 1, Wyndham Vale is simply out. One reason above all others, owner-occupier appeal, but simply Wyndham Vale is a new estate suburb. Your house stock is predominantly post-2010 project homes on small lots. Very little cosmetic renovation opportunity because the houses are relatively new. Very little architectural character homes that were built to a volume builder template. The yield, it does potentially look a lot more attractive on spreadsheet, but the asset itself offers no value add potential. You're buying a cookie cutter product in a suburb where supply can be replicated because they are still releasing land and building the same product in the next street. There's no scarcity, there is no design inefficiency to exploit. And in a post-budget environment where negative gearing on established properties is quarantined, you need assets that perform because of what you can do to them, not because the tax system carries the holding costs for you. Wyndham Vale is a tax play dressed as an investment, and I'm simply not interested in that type of asset or market. Cut number 2, surprisingly, is Frankston North, and this time it's out for a different reason, and this one is quite important to understand because it's not about the suburb being bad, it's about this suburb sitting too close to a better choice option at about the same price. Frankston proper has a better lifestyle appeal, stronger socioeconomic profile, better rental amenity, beach access, a more established owner-occupier community, and it's within $50,000 reach in terms of price difference. When the premium between a suburb and its superior counterpart is that narrow, you don't buy the weaker option. You stretch for the better one. The whole point of suburb selection is positioning your asset in front of the broadest, strongest buyer pool at exit. Frankston North's demographic profile and reputation creates a ceiling that the buyer pool, Frankston proper, does not. At the price differential, the value buy is Frankston and not Frankston North. And Frankston itself sits above that 700K house brief, so the entire Frankston corridor drops off this particular list. The biggest mistake, if you do nothing else after this video, get this part right. The single biggest mistake people make when they try to do this themselves with a 700K budget is actually 2 mistakes that compound into one disaster. The first, confusing cheapest with the most undervalued. We covered that at the start of the video. The second, and this is one even experienced investors miss, completely misunderstanding what affordability actually means. Affordability has 2 dimensions. Most people think about affordability in one dimension, their own. They look at the pre-approval. They see 700K, they find a property for 580K. They think, great, that's affordable for me. I can buy it. But that is only one half of the equation, and it is a less important half. The question you should be asking is not just, can I afford to buy this property? The question is, can the local population of that suburb afford to keep buying properties like this one after I have bought it? Because your capital growth over the next 5 to 10 years isn't driven by your borrowing capacity. It's driven by the borrowing capacity and income growth of the people who buy the next property on that street and the one after that. It's sustained by the depth of owner-occupier demand at the price point in that local economy. If you buy a 500K house in a suburb where the median household income is 75K a year and the local employment base is casualized and fragile, then you're buying in a market where the next buyer is stretched before they even walk in the door. Owner-occupier depth is thin. Price growth requires a constant flow of new buyers you can service a mortgage at that level. If local incomes can't support it, the growth stalls, the price ceiling forms, and you're stuck holding an asset in a suburb where the fundamentals can't sustain what you've modeled. And that is why Broadmeadows is on my bottom 5. Its affordability is at the higher end. Why we are buying in Broadmeadows is simply because of land opportunity to manufacture a product. At Insighto, we measure this specifically. We'll look at the years to own ratio, the median household income relative to the median house price, the local employment composition, and here's a rule of thumb. If it takes more than 45 years of median household income to own the median house in a suburb, affordability is stretched. The growth trajectory becomes fragile, so you avoid it. If it sits at that 30 to 38 years to own, there's definitely room for a local buyer pool to absorb further price movement. That range is where you ideally want to be. And Melton West sits in that range. Local incomes are trades and professional dominated. So your dual income houses are the norm. Also, the 550k to 600k price point is accessible to the first home buyers with standard pre-approvals. That depth in the buyer pool is what protects your growth and your exit. So the directive is simple here. Whether you take my list and start your own due diligence or you do this with a buyer's agent, the rule is simply the same. Do not just check whether you can afford to buy the property. Check whether the local community can afford to keep buying properties like it after you. If a local income depth isn't there, neither is your growth, unless you can manufacture a product like duplexes, townhouses, 5 suburbs, 2 cuts, 1 framework, 1 mistake to avoid. If you want help applying this to a real property in real time, the link to book a strategy session is in the description. And of course, I'll see you in the next one.